Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 7 of the Moving Forward podcast, a podcast hosted by me, Jacob Lothmer, about the NBA. And we have a couple things to talk about. Obviously, a lot of head coach hirings, and we saw 2 games from the Suns and the Clippers, and 1 game from the Hawks and the Bucks over the long weekend. And I'm going to break them down, kind of talk to you guys about those. So I'm excited to do that in this week's episode. But first, let's talk about the head coaches. Boston hires Udoka from the Nets. Obviously, I haven't heard much about him, but from everything that I've heard from that Nets coaching staff, is he's very well respected. He paid a lot of his dues. Took some time to really come through the ranks. I'm surprised that Mike D'Antoni wasn't somebody that was further looked at, but it looked like Brad Stevens, now the GM of the Celtics, really had a vision of where he wanted to go with this head coach. And I think it's a decent hire. It's kind of hard to say when you don't know really very much about the person. So we'll have to see about that moving forward. But I think that that Celtics team is in a really nice position to be a very successful basketball team. They have a decent amount of cap space, even though they're paying Brown and Tatum a lot of money, and now that Horford's on this contract, he's in there. But I do like what they did with Moses Brown, bringing him back into the fold and everything. So I really like that deal, and they have a lot of decisions they really need to make at the front office level with Brad Stevens, as far as Marcus Smart, whether you want to bring back Fournier, what's going on with these role players that don't really work, like Langford or Grant Williams, those kind of guys, Tristan Thompson. So they have a lot of decisions to make there. So I'm will be curious to see what this team looks like come October when the NBA season restarts, because I think it's going to look vastly different from what it looks like right now. So it's kind of hard to say how Udoka will do as the Celtics head coach because he's never been a head coach before. But the next person that we're going to talk about has been a head coach for, I think, 2 other teams. So Jason Kidd getting his 3rd shot, I think, at being a head coach. Tried with the Nets, didn't go so well. Tried with the Bucks, was fired there. He's bounced around as assistant coach a couple different places. Recently was on the Lakers and won a championship in 2020 with the Lakers. But Jason Kidd is now the head coach of the Dallas Mavericks. He'll be coaching Luka. He'll be trying to get them through their issues that they're currently having. But it seems like they found their coach, and they're going to go with Jason Kidd. And you know what? I don't ever think Jason Kidd was one of the issues wherever he went. I feel like he's a really good coach, and I think that he can add to what Luka's learning and what Luka's doing. Giannis started posting some of his best numbers ever before Bud took over as the coach, and they fired Jason Kidd. Giannis was starting to grow into his own. So I think that Jason Kidd can get the best out of this team. I think the team probably needs a new face. Rick Carlisle was there for so long, and I think it's finally just time for someone new to step in and, cement themselves as the head coach and bring a new offense. Maybe Kidd will be better at defense. That was always one of the issues with Carlisle's coaching and this Mavericks team altogether, is their defensive issues. Obviously, they have to address this Porzingis situation. I don't think it's going to end well. I think it's going to end at a trade of Porzingis and some different pieces being swapped around. But Dallas is also, just like the Celtics, a team that I think makes it to the playoffs easily, but is having a hard time taking that next step. So we'll see if Kidd can take that next step. The final coach hiring was the Blazers hiring Chauncey Billups to be their first-time head coach. Chauncey Billups, a longtime NBA player. He's been an assistant coach on the Clippers, but now is moving into a head coaching role with the Blazers. I know that he really wanted to be an NBA executive for a long time, like a GM, but he's settled in on the coaching role, and it's at a bad time to be wanting this job. Damian Lillard has discussed how he doesn't believe that a contender can be built around him in Portland. There's a chance that he could try to work his way out of Portland. He would be able to decide where he wants to go. But Chauncey's going to get at least a season to try to convince Damian Lillard and the people in Portland that, hey, this is not going to be a blow it up rebuild. This is something that we can build on. Portland made the Western Conference Finals a few years ago, but got swept by the Warriors without even Durant. So it's tough to see for this Blazers team. They have a lot of offense and no defense. That's another thing. Chauncey was probably one of the best defensive teams of the early 2000s with the Detroit Pistons, so maybe Chauncey can bring in a new defensive look. But I just think with some undersized guards who can give you really nice things scoring the ball, it doesn't help on the defensive end. And they picked up Norman Powell, who plays a little bit of the three, sometimes two. He's undersized for a three, kind of the perfect size for a two. So when you're rolling those three guys out there together, as good as they are scoring the basketball, defensively they're a liability with how short they are. And then Covington and Nurkic. Covington, a pretty decent defender. When he's on ball, off ball, he gets a little lazy. And then Nurkic, all the same, not really known for being a bad defender, but not a great defender. So I'll be curious to see what happens with these coaches. I think all three of these teams are playoff teams, but can they make it past that round of the playoffs? That's the thing, why they're moving on to these new coaches. So I'll be curious to see next season. These rosters will look very, very different come on October. I think these teams are going to make a lot of changes. So I'm excited to see where that goes. So now let's go over and talk about the Bucks and the Hawks game last night. So game 3 of the Eastern Conference Finals last night between the Bucks and the Hawks happened, and I thought the Hawks were easily going to take this one. I thought they were going to walk away with it. It seemed like a decent chunk, a decent lead for most of the game. They outscored Milwaukee by 5 in the first quarter. I thought they were doing well. It was obviously tied at halftime, but it always felt like, especially in that third quarter, early fourth quarter, that the Hawks were just kind of like holding on to a 6 or an 8 point lead. The same thing that I gave the Hawks credit for in Game 1 was the way they stuck around with the Bucks. It's the same thing I'll give the Bucks credit for in Game 3. The Bucks really stuck around with the Hawks this game. They really made them earn everything they did. Tough injury to Trae Young. He looked hobbled the rest of the game. He tried to play, but did not look as explosive as he was in that first half. In the first half, he was electric and really, really cool to see. But yet again, I feel like this was a great game for the Bucks. Pat Connaughton still played 32 minutes, which you don't like to see, but I understand why he plays that many minutes. He had a plus 25 off the bench, so Pat Connaughton really showing what he can do. He had 8 rebounds for you. That's really nice. But this was going to go down as the Khris Middleton game. Giannis had a nice 33-point game, but Khris Middleton really played really great. 38 points for Khris on 6 of 12 from shooting from 3, 15 of 26. He put up a lot of shots this game after kind of having a stinker of Game 1. And in Game 2, he didn't play all that great even in a win. So it's nice to see Khris Middleton have his big game. PJ Tucker did PJ Tucker things. He only scored you 3. But the really one thing for a negative that sticks out to me for Brooklyn was Brook Lopez's minus 17. He was the only starter to post a negative box score plus minus. And Bobby Portis posted a plus 17. I don't know if it was just matchups and how it worked out. But Bobby Portis did seem to have a little bit more energy and a little bit more like banging bodies down low when he came in. He has a little bit more of a chip on his shoulder. Plays a little bit more aggressive than Brook Lopez does, even though Brook has more height and their 3-point shooting abilities are pretty equal. But I did like what Bobby Portis gave them last night. Bobby Portis played really, really well. And I feel like moving forward, I think the minutes for Bobby Portis should increase. He only played around 17 this game. Book played around 25. I'd like to see them both playing around 21, 22 minutes, maybe more as equals than Brooks still being cemented as like the number one starter. So on the Bucks side of things, that's what I'd like to see moving forward. On Atlanta, Atlanta had a pretty decent game. They tried their best. They really just fizzled out at the end. They came out and they were really, really playing well. I thought they were doing a great job of kind of dominating the Bucks as far as getting to where they wanted to go and doing what they wanted to do. I don't know what it was, but Trae Young in that first half just felt like he could get whatever he wanted, and that kind of went away in the second half. Credit to Coach Bud, who usually doesn't make changes, made a lot of changes this game, the way he guarded Trae Young. The pick and roll was guarded a lot better. They took Brook Lopez out more and kind of had a smaller lineup with Giannis running the 5, and I think that allowed them to switch better. So I really did like that from them. But as far as the rest of the Hawks, I think you can put it not really on Trae Young's shoulder this game. Like, they didn't have the greatest scoring from their other guys. Like, they had a nice 13 from John Collins. You'd like to see him closer to 20. Clint Capella, he's got to get double digits. He only had 8 points. Bogdanovich, I know he's injured, but 2 from 10 from 3 is not very good. I think maybe you just got to realize what you can and can't do out there. And he had 8. Herder with 11, he played pretty well. You'd like to see a little bit more from Red Velvet, coolest nickname in the NBA. And Gallinari with 18 for you off the bench, but he did not have the best plus-minus numbers. In his defense, that was because the Bucks' second unit was doing a really, really good job, not really on him. But didn't see any Cam Reddish tonight, which was odd after I thought he did pretty good in the blowout in Game 2. He got his first taste of minutes since, I think, February. So would have liked to see a little bit more Cam Reddish minutes, just because I think he's a versatile wing that gives you something off the bench, maybe a body to put in front of Middleton, because he's a long, lengthy, decent defender. So I would have liked to see more Cam Reddish this game, but going forward into Atlanta Game 2, you obviously have to hope that Trae Young's ankle is okay, but Atlanta really needs to get everybody else more involved. They have to hit their shots. It's not like they didn't get open shots. John Collins only attempting 8 shots. That has to be more. If you're the number 2 star in your team, you have to take more than 8 shots in a game. I know he was in foul trouble for most of the game, which really hurt the Hawks. But when you are in there, you have to try to keep your hands off people and then make a good effect. Like, this shouldn't be happening with John Collins getting 5 fouls, because Clint Capella has been taking most of the minutes guarding Giannis when he's out there. And Collins is kind of guarding Brook Lopez. So if you're Collins, you have to have more than 16 and take more than 8 shots. And then obviously if you're Bogdanovich, 2 for 10 on 3, 3 for 16. This really comes down to Bogdanovich having a really, really poor game. He only posted a -2 while he was out there, but it's just because Trae Young did such a good job in that first half. And then once the game was said and done, Bogdanovich was out of there. So I think moving forward, this Atlanta team really needs to capitalize on this home court advantage. You can't let the Bucks steal another one and take it 3-1 going back to Milwaukee. I think that'd be pretty much game, set, match. So I think as far as the Bucks and as far as the Hawks, I think it's just going to come down to can the other Hawks players contribute to Trae Young. Trae Young had 35. No one else even got close. Gallinari had 18 off the bench, but I don't know what that's going to get you. Moving forward, everybody on the Hawks has to be better. Now heading over to the Clippers and the Suns. This is going into Game 5 currently, with the Suns up 3-1. A lot of people think this is pretty much over. Kawhi Leonard will not be coming back for the rest of the series. That is done. But we've watched 2 games from them, and the Clippers had a really nice Game 4. Or Game 3, their first game back in the Staples Center. They won 106-92. It just really felt like they were dominating for most of the game. It was Chris Paul's first game back. He struggled. Cameron Payne had an injury. He didn't play to his best ability. But it was a really nice game from the Clippers. They were really sound defensively. 2 games in a row now they've been really sound defensively, holding the Suns to 92. And then this game on Saturday, only holding them to 84 points, but that's tough when you can only put up 80 and you lose 84-80. That Game 5 or Game 4 really put basketball back like 15 years. It felt like a really early 2000s game, but it was a really good game. It was a really, really good Game 4, even though it was very low scoring. It was a really, really nice, like, old-fashioned basketball. Like, the Suns had a pretty decent lead. They were up by a lot of points, and it took a really big Clippers comeback. They were down a decent amount, and then the Clippers outscored them 30-19 in that third quarter. And then in the fourth, a combined 29 points were scored between the two teams, 15 points for Phoenix and 14 points for the Clippers. It was a really good game as far as like competitiveness, but if you like offense, which most people in the NBA like offense, pretty boring. Pretty bad Crowder and Bridges game with only 3 and 6. Really the big 3 of the Suns did a bulk of the scoring. Ayton had 19, really nice game. Chris Paul finally having a better game after having a pretty poor Game 3. Bounces back with 18 and 7. And then Booker has 25. Finally a nice Booker game. It's been a little bit. He's been trying to get free from Patrick Beverley. He had a nice game. But Reggie Jackson continues to step up in a year where he's trying to earn a contract, scores 20 points for them. Zubats with 13. Marcus Morris only plays 22 minutes and only gives you 4 points. That contract they gave him last offseason is starting to look more and more like a bad idea. For a guy who's pretty inconsistent and he only took 8 shots, and a guy you're paying like 17 or 18 million dollars, I believe. That's not what you need. It was pretty bad. And then Paul George, he scores 23, but 12 of those 23 come from free throws. He had a pretty poor shooting night. A lot of playoff P kind of feels to this game. A lot of people have been saying that. Terrence Mann had a really nice game off the bench with 12, but everybody else kind of struggled to give them any efficiency. Batum with only 3, Cousins with 1, and Luke Kennard with 2. So just the supporting cast of the Clippers not playing the best. Neither did the supporting cast of the Suns. It came down to who has more star power on their team, and with no Kawhi Leonard, I feel like that's the Suns. They had 3 guys who could get it done, while the Clippers did have 2 with Reggie Jackson. But if you were telling me, like, would you rather take, like, Reggie Jackson, like the top 3 scorers on each team, would you rather take Zubats, Reggie Jackson, and Paul George, or DeAndre Ayton, Chris Paul, and Devin Booker? You're going to take the Suns' top 3 with Booker every single time. But no Kawhi in Game 5. I think this series is pretty much over. Game 5 is tonight, ESPN at 9 o'clock. As far as my predictions for the games, I do feel like the Suns win and get this one over with. I think that the Suns just, it was just a bad luck for the Clippers with the Kawhi injury, and I feel like it's worse than they're making it out to be. And the Suns are just, like, overall just a better team than the Clippers. So I think we're going to see our first team edge their way into the NBA Finals. It will be the Phoenix Suns. Kawhi Leonard is still out. Cameron Payne should be playing in this one. It's a 5.5 for the Suns. Don't really love that one. That's tough to guess if it will be over that. But the over going down really, really low to 214. It hasn't hit over 214 since the very first game of the series, and we just saw an 84-80 matchup. I think this game is going to want you to take the over. It's going to want you to say, hey, look at this 214. Look at how low that is for a 2021 NBA game. So I think that it goes under 214. I think this is the classic. They want you to take this, so you should take it, but I think that's a little bit of a trick. So as far as the game tonight, I think the Suns really close it out. The Suns cement themselves in the NBA Finals for the first time since the 90s with Charles Barkley against the Bulls, where they got trashed. So looking forward to seeing the Suns in the Finals for the first time. It'll be Chris Paul's first trip to the Finals. It'll be a lot of player on the Suns team's first trip to the Finals. So really looking forward to seeing who comes out of the East, because either of those teams haven't been in the Finals in a long time. So we're going to see some parity in the NBA this year, and we're going to see a champion that we haven't maybe never seen, or a champion that we haven't seen since the 1970s. So looking forward to that one. Suns, Clippers tonight. I'm taking under 214. So ride with me or go against me. I've been pretty bad this year, so I wouldn't blame you for going against me. So Sean and I on Thursday kind of hit on the Pistons and what we think they're going to do in the draft coming up this year. And as fun as that was, I feel like it'd be only fair to kind of do every single team. So on episodes that I'm by myself on Tuesdays, I'm only going to be doing one team and kind of their choices of what I think they should do in their draft. And then on Thursdays, which I think might be permanently Sean coming on and doing 2 people, we're going to do 2 teams where I'll do a team and he'll do a team, and we'll kind of counteract off of each other. So I'm going to break down the Houston Rockets and what they should do in their upcoming draft. So the Houston Rockets ended up losing the draft and getting the 2nd overall pick, but that's not really the end of the world. Their thing was not having it fall out of the top 4. If they would have fallen out of the top 4, they would have lost it to the Oklahoma City Thunder. And with a team like this, you really, really need young talent. Looking at their roster, they have Jayshawn Tate, who is an all-NBA rookie first-teamer, who I think will be a nice building block moving forward. Kenya Martin Jr. was really nice this year as well, really proving to be a nice second-round pick for them. And then Christian Wood, injured most of the year, but we know what Christian Wood can do. He's very serviceable. He can play your center or power forward, so that's kind of hinting of where I think they should go at it. John Wall has a pretty much unmovable contract. He might be bought out in the future, but for now, I don't think his contract is very movable. Daniel House, he had that nice run, but I don't feel like he's really adding much. Kelly Olynyk was actually a really nice piece for them this year. He had a really nice year last season, putting up some really decent numbers. I don't know if that's just because it's like a decent player on a bad team, that kind of thing, but Kelly Olynyk had a really nice year, and I'd look for him to be a main piece of them moving forward. Eric Gordon, I think his time is pretty much over for the Houston Rockets. His contract's kind of tough to move, but a lot of people could use that kind of scoring. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see Eric Gordon moved this offseason, but we'll have to see because they need to make way for their starting shooting guard of the future, Kevin Porter Jr. He's been really, really good for them. I've been super impressed by what Kevin Porter Jr. can do. He's had his off-season and off-the-court issues, but when he's on the court, he is a very, very good basketball player, can create for himself. Just super impressed by what he can do with the basketball. He's a really, really good ISO player. He gave Drew Holiday an absolute buckets last year. So as far as the roster, I feel like they have some really nice stuff on this roster moving forward. But what should they do in the upcoming draft? I feel like there are 3 options that are kind of staring you in the face, all depending on which route you want to go. So, option number 1, draft Evan Mobley and put him and Christian Wood right next to each other, 4 and 5. This could work. They don't really have a dominant down-low center who's that good of a defender. Christian Wood is not a great defender, but Evan Mobley is. Christian Wood can step out and hit the 3. Mobley's not ready for that yet, and it kind of gives you somebody who can mentor Mobley in the ways of the NBA and Christian Wood. Besides that, they don't really have a great center. They right now are doing Kelly Olynyk and Christian Wood next to each other. That's what I would kind of think that their future would be. That's a pretty bad defensive back or front court. So as far as that, I feel like they could definitely improve a lot defensively. Option number 2, Jalen Green, starting shooting guard, which is kind of where Kevin Porter Jr. plays, or starting 3, it's where Jayshawn Tate, your Rookie of the Year, played, or you can bring him off the bench as a 6-man for a little bit. But as far as this team, they have a lot of shooting guards, and I don't know if they know what to do with them. They have Eric Gordon, who needs to be moved. They have Kevin Porter Jr., who needs playing time. They have Armani Brooks, who's a pretty decent shooting guard. They have Avery Bradley. They have Kyrie Thomas. A lot of shooting guards on this team, way too many. So the Jalen Green approach kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense as far as the point is, what are you doing with your backcourt, your front court moving, or backcourt moving forward? Like, what are you going to do? Like, are you going to cut some of this fat off? But the number one thing that makes the most sense to me is, number 1, Jalen Suggs. Jalen Suggs can play either the 1 or the 2, depending on what you need him to do. So that gives him versatility to come off the bench next season if you plan on starting Porter and John Wall. But Suggs could be a really good number 1 as a point guard moving forward for you. I feel like Suggs kind of adds he'll constantly give you effort on defense, and he'll make up for what Kevin Porter does not do on the defensive end of the court, which is try very hard. Suggs really does do that. Suggs puts in his best effort. So moving forward, if between those 3 options, who are the 3 like big names moving forward, I feel like the best choice here going forward is Jalen Suggs. A lot of people have him falling to number 4, but for me, I'm going to have him going 2, because if they try to move off John Wall, what point guard is going to take over? You kind of have DJ Augustine, but that's not really an option you want to go. So I think they're pretty set, actually, and I like their big men. I like Christian Wood. I like Kelly Olynyk. Kenyon Martin Jr. can play a small ball 4. He's pretty good. So it really comes down to, what is your plan for your point guard or your center? Are you okay with bringing Kelly Olynyk off the bench? That's a nice bench piece. But Christian Wood might not be as comfortable playing the 4, less spacing with Mobley, or do you want to take Jalen Suggs, who will bring you versatility off the bench playing the 1 or the 2, depending on which lineup he's in, or he could be your starting point guard if you decide to move off John Wall. For me, I think the pick is Jalen Suggs at 2 for the Houston Rockets.